I am a wife, a mom, a granny, a friend, and Kevin and I really work well as a team, which is evident through our work as advocates with the Alzheimer Society of Ireland. As a spousal carer, every day in my world can present different challenges. I can often forget who I am. I struggle to sleep. I worry about the future, and I am stressed in the moment. Through my position as chair of the Dementia Carers Campaign Network, I also hear the struggles of others who care. Some may lose their jobs, and their mental and physical health can deteriorate. We as family carers can reach breaking point, and on many occasions, I have heard others like myself use words like desperate, breaking point, totally overwhelmed and hopeless. I'm proud to MC this event today as we hear the voices of other carers, of people living with dementia and the Alzheimer Society team. We are coming together to speak about what people affected by dementia need from the upcoming budget 2022. As the country reopens, there is a continuous crisis happening right now as family carers and people living with dementia try to survive without all the supports they had before COVID-19. I want to acknowledge the people with dementia and family carers and supporters who cannot be here, people whose dementia has advanced, or people who are so busy caring they do not get time out. We think of them throughout our work and we stand in solidarity with them. So please use the chat box to say who you are and to put questions or comments to the speakers, but I'll be keeping an eye on this. Before we start, we would love to get a picture of all of you to mark the launch. So if you would like to be in the picture, please put your camera on and you can just smile now. Well, all set? Beautiful portraits. We have a number of speakers today and I'm running a tight ship. We are grateful to you all for taking the time to attend, and I will ensure that our speakers stick to their allotted time. I have my helpful assistants, Lisa and Laura from the Alzheimer Society, keeping an eye on time and all the technical issues. If anything goes wrong, of course, I can blame them. So to begin this morning, we are honoured to have former Minister for Justice, Nora Owen, in conversation with ASI Advocacy Manager, Clodagh Whelan, and we will play this video now. Thank you, Laura.
Good morning, Nora, and thank you so much for joining us to speak about the Alzheimer Society of Ireland pre-budget submission. There's lots of people in the virtual room this morning who know you as a councillor, as a TD, as a government minister, as deputy leader of Fine Gael. In the Alzheimer Society, we know you as all that, but also as a family carer. So I'd like to begin by asking you to tell us a little bit about your husband, Brian, who lived with dementia and sadly died last November, and why you and Brian chose to be open about dementia.
Good morning, Clodagh, and thank you for the introduction. Yes, Brian was diagnosed about 14 years ago now with dementia. And so for 12 of those years, he stayed at home with me. I cared for him at home. He got some outside help. He went to a day centre once a week, but mostly it was me and the family that looked after him. And at a certain stage, I began to realise that I was hiding away as well from telling people that Brian had dementia, because I didn't want them to be looking at him and saying, oh, that's the man with dementia. But one day I happened to be doing a radio interview, and for some reason I said straight out, I'm looking after my husband who has dementia. And I just felt that it was the right thing to say. And it started a procedure whereby people began to ask me to talk about it publicly. And I knew it was the right thing to do. Not enough of us who are carers talk about it publicly. It's not easy to talk about. And therefore, the stigma, the hidden, I think you called it the forgotten crisis, stays hidden. And therefore, maybe governments and politicians don't always take note of the needs of people with dementia and the needs of the carers, the 500,000 or so people who are caring for somebody with dementia. So in a way, I suppose I took that decision myself. Brian wasn't probably as aware that I was going to go public, but it didn't make a big difference to him. We just got on with our life. And since then, in the last 3 to 4 years, I have done quite a lot of public pronouncements and public interviews about people with dementia. And I think people have said to me it has helped them.
It really helps because, as you say, we take away the stigma every time we talk about living with dementia and supporting a person living with dementia. Of course, we're here this morning to talk about the Alzheimer Society pre-budget submission. And a large part of that submission is capital investment required for day centres all over Ireland. There's communities throughout the country who have day centres that cannot reopen because of that lack of funding. And I'd really be interested in what you think about that and why it's so necessary.
Well, I noticed during the pandemic, the COVID, a number of the services that were available to people with dementia and to their carers had to close down. We had a small service here where I live in Malahide, a day centre once a week, and it was wonderful. 10 people got an opportunity to go to the day centre. Their carers got an opportunity to have a few hours off. We had to close that centre. The Alzheimer Society felt it wasn't safe to have those centres open. And now that things are beginning to open up again, there's a big gap in the provision of centres. And the Alzheimer Society is trying very hard to get a centre in as many communities as possible opened up. It requires trained people who can run them. It requires a location where perhaps rent has to be paid. It requires services like maybe Meals on Wheels and other services for the people with dementia. And so there is a cost involved. And I think that without those centres, more and more people will suffer. The people with dementia won't get the extra socialising that they need from going to these centres, and their carers will, quite frankly, get fully worn out. I know how easy it is to get worn out when you're caring for somebody, because almost every week something new is happening to somebody with dementia. One week they're very happy to have a shower. The next week, they won't get into the shower. So another whole set of services and needs arise. So the money that Alzheimer's are looking for is absolutely crucial to get those centres up and running.
You've captured it beautifully there, you know, the joyful activities and stimulation for the person living with dementia. And of course, that break from caring for the family member at home, because their well-being is so interlinked, as we know.
Yes.
There's a lot of politicians and your former colleagues in the virtual room this morning. And, you know, I suppose to finish, what would you say directly to them about what they can do to help people living with dementia and supporting people with dementia?
Well, I send my warm greetings to all my former colleagues. They're now real colleagues in the Dáil and Senate, and I say hello to them all, no matter what party you're in. I would imagine that a large number of you watching have personal experience of somebody in their family with dementia, or maybe just starting on the road to dementia, maybe just a little bit of forgetfulness coming in, and the family is beginning to discuss, how do we look after mother, how do we look after father, how do we look after our grandparents? And so there probably isn't one of you that doesn't have some kind of experience. So the more you raise this issue, the more you raise it with the ministers, with the purse strings, the better it will be, because you are helping to remove some of the stigma, and you are also perhaps making sure that an amount of money is made available for these community centres particularly. It's not a big ask. I mean, I know the Alzheimer's has put in for a 29 million budget, but that is a very small amount of money when you consider the amount of money that gets spent on so many other areas of public life. And I would just say to all of you as colleagues, don't be afraid to go to your relevant minister. Don't be afraid to tell them maybe that you have a personal experience of somebody who can't get the care that they need, and to ask for that money to be made available. Last year, there was 13 million made available, and the Alzheimer Society was very grateful for that, and it helped to increase the number of Alzheimer's advisors around the country, dementia advisors that will help people when they realise that one of their loved ones is going into that dementia range. So now is your opportunity. Just put aside some of your other asks and make this ask your big ask to the Minister. It's the Minister for Health, it's the Minister Paschal Donoghue, Minister Michael McGrath. Just go to them, talk to them privately, and raise it on the floor of the Dáil and on the floor of the Senate, as many of you have done in the past. Now is the time, pre-budget, raise it in the next 2 weeks, and we might see some good success coming from that.
Thank you so much. That's great advice to finish on. Challenge stigma and raise funds. We couldn't have said it better ourselves. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning.
Thank you, Nora. I identify with the struggles that Nora mentioned as a family carer, and it just goes to show from Clontarf to Kanturk, it is a universal experience. Next, this morning, we will hear directly from people whose lives will be affected by Budget 2022. The Alzheimer Society Communications Manager, Cormac Cahill, will now speak directly to Helen Rochford-Brennan, who is living with young onset dementia, and Denise Monaghan, who supports her dad, Seamus, who's also living with dementia. Please put any questions you may have in the chat box, and Cormac will try to include them. I will hand you over now to Cormac.
Thanks for that introduction, Helena. Hello there, everyone. Since Helen Rochford-Brennan was diagnosed with early onset Alzheimer's in July 2012, she really has been a fearless champion of people living with dementia, and has helped to raise awareness of people living with dementia, and also the profile of human rights for people with dementia in Ireland, in Europe, and further afield. Helen, it's great to have you here today. Thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, thank you, Cormac. It's nice to be here again 8 years later. Ha ha, hardly. I'm glad to be with you this morning, and I suppose, can I say that after 8 years, a couple of years ago, we started to get funding, and I'm very grateful for that. I'm very grateful that after us shouting for many years for money for services for people with dementia, and of course services and supports for our supporters and our carers, and us during all that period of time, my life has been very busy with the Irish Dementia Working Group, advocating for change, advocating for the removal of stigma, for proper budgets, for having our voices heard, for hopefully one day soon we will be part of that multidisciplinary team that is happening at this very moment within our health services from which we are excluded, when they discuss a pathway of care for us, which is what we want funding for. Sadly, there isn't adequate funding or support for any of us. So a few people in the room may remember these words: a lot done, more to do. And there is a lot done, and there's more to do. For me, over all those years, nothing much has been done about the urban-rural divide. And I find that really, really stressful. You know, us people in the country, we deserve the same rights as people within cities across this country, and we do not have that. There is no comparison in the services we have in rural and remote areas. And look, we've been asking for advice, we've been asking for support over all the years, and we're hoping that finally this will be recognised, Cormac, and that, you know, it's still disheartening when I meet people or people call me and ask me for advice. What am I to do? We have the Understand Together campaign, which is raising the profile on dementia. People are trying now with COVID. It's been difficult to get diagnosed, but when they're diagnosed, there are no services. And honestly, I came out of the supermarket only the other day, and I met a young woman who's has a young family, and she was like this: what am I going to do? It's 2021, folks. You know, when are we going to get an adequate budget?
Sure, Helen. And Helen, I mean, you mentioned there that you've actually been involved in the last 8 pre-budget submission campaigns for the ASI. That's some feat. And look, you know, we remember on the very first, you know, pre-budget campaign, you stood there at the gates of the Dáil with your husband, Sean. And I know Sean sadly passed away last December. So I just want to ask you now, how are you coping now as somebody living with dementia?
Life is very difficult, Cormac, without Sean. I live alone with my dog, Lexi. You know, it's lonely, it's isolating. I miss his laughter. I miss dropping him off to the pub and picking up his friends, wondering how many I'll pick up on a night to bring home and drop off and have the chat and have some fun. He was just huge support to me, and he helped me with everything, you know, on my daily life. He read me articles, he shared his orange with me, he read things for me and always left notes, especially things of interest while I was away doing my advocacy work. Look, thanks to local services, in particular Sligo Cancer Support, you know, I've been able to get counselling. I've been able to learn to live again. There's no book on widowhood, and I can tell you, I Googled and I Googled for help for the person with dementia that was left. There's nothing. There's lots of work for lots and lots I could read about carers, but there's nothing for the person with dementia. It's like as if our spouses will never, our partners will never pass away. So I'm afraid to cook, to be honest, because I leave the stove on. I have left the door open, and I won't tell you all how many times. I forgot to take my medicine, and I only realized when the pharmacy called to remind me the other day that I had missed it 3 times last month. I have all the strategies in place. I have all the notes by the door. But unfortunately, I really don't have any support. The days are long. We don't visit anymore like we used to in rural Ireland. COVID has impacted on that. So what I ask for person-centered support for me, my friend Agnes in Scotland, who many of you may know, receives 10 hours self-directed weekly care. And that's all I'm asking for. You know, I get really anxious, and I have got so anxious now and agitated, to be honest with you about it, that I stopped asking, because I did a mini mental test, and the PHN told me that my score was too high on the day. So I couldn't receive support. So we need home care, you know, person-centered home care packages. And you see one person with dementia, you see we're all different. You see Kevin and myself today, we're completely different types of dementia. So we need the national dementia. We know that we have a strategy and a model of care, which is about to be implemented. Do you know what? It's a grand document, as we say in the West, but without a time frame. What good is it? And you know, our families, all of us, as Alina so eloquently spoke, you know, we all need supports. We need supports. We need to have people who are diagnosed, as I said earlier, you know, with the Understand Together, when they're diagnosed and there's no services. So, you know, we can have all the documents in the world, but if they're not implemented fully, and if there isn't timeframes, I ask, what business model in the world doesn't have a time frame? So I'm clearly aware, you know, that there are other people like myself that are totally frustrated, and I speak, it's not my voice. I'm not just speaking on behalf of myself, I'm speaking on behalf of the voiceless.
Sure. I mean, in Nora Owen's video earlier on, you know, she talked about the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic in terms of its impact on people with dementia and the carers. I mean, have you got, you know, a view on this, and how did you find the pandemic living through it?
Well, now, Cormac, we were locked up and we were locked down. There was many of us locked in nursing homes that couldn't see anybody. We were locked in hospitals. We were locked at home. It was difficult for people with dementia to create a new routine. You know, it just seemed so long. The days were never ending. So much isolation. You know, we met the neighbours when we snuck out for a walk when we were supposed to be locked up. But I mean, I just had to get out of the house, to be honest. You know, we couldn't get to the post office, we couldn't go to the bank, we couldn't go shopping, we couldn't, for people like myself who are advocates, we couldn't do any of that. And, you know, if you were lucky enough to have home care, you might meet somebody. But when you were living in a rural, isolated and remote area, it was really, really difficult for those people with dementia and older people, will I say, as an older person myself. We stayed at, you know, we really paid a high price, Cormac. You know, we stayed at home. We ensured we were not in hospitals. We weren't putting any unnecessary, I'm not sure the word is, unnecessary visits to doctors or hospitals. So we didn't overwhelm the health service. And, you know, there was a lot of chat about us protecting us. And let me tell you, people with dementia, we protected the health service, as I've just said. So now we would hope by doing all that we were supposed to do, you know, we stood in solidarity with our health service professionals. But we want that in return. You know, today we want solidarity in return. We're resilient, you know. I suppose we learned a lot about technology, and I better say this, we learned a lot of technology. We learned about words like platform and Zoom. Well, sure, the only platform I knew about was a train station, and Zoom was, you know, zoomed in on something. So we learned all of these things, but we had to learn them. But I want to think about all the people that never had that opportunity, whether it's from remote Donegal, Kerry, Galway, wherever, Sligo, you know, those people didn't have a chance. And, you know, we need to always remember that going forward with COVID, with the next pandemic, that we really are in a better place of finding the necessary supports for people. And we can never understand that we couldn't get into day centres, because, to be honest, you know, in the beginning, yes, I could understand. But as time has gone on and centres have been closed down, up and down this country, there are loads of town halls, there are loads of family resource centres. Why couldn't we be innovative? And why can't the government give the funding to get people out of their own homes? You know, so for me, can I just finish by saying on that, COVID, we're grateful for technology, but can I tell you, there's nothing we miss more than our human connection, you know, and we want to make sure that there's nothing, you know, when we have to come off the phone and or off a Zoom call, it's leave. There's no chance there for somebody that's down to reach out and connect with them and ask them what's wrong. So I think from a dementia perspective, technology has been good. It's been good for those of us that have had capacity and access. There's lots of people that have no broadband, or not the ability to be able to learn how to use technology.
And Helen, just to finish up there, I mean, I know you're a huge believer and advocate for, you know, healthcare for all, dementia supports. I mean, is there one thing you'd like to say to all the TDs and senators that are here today? Is there one message you would like to leave them with?
Well, there's a couple. When I spoke to you in 2019, which I met you in person, you know, I asked you to get off the fence and take action and to work for your constituents. Yes, you have done some, but I asked for a standalone budget and not piecemeal. The funding we get is not adequate. As we said before this meeting, you know, we shouldn't be asking for money. It's our healthcare. You know, if it's cancer services, by golly, they get all the funding they need. You know, there are 336 half hours in a week, Cormac, and we take care of ourselves 335 of those. So I want to remind you again that the HSE definition of home care is a shower. Well, let me tell you, as long as we're clean and I have my lipstick on, I'm fine. Well, I'm not fine. So I'm asking you to please make sure we have proper services. We had high hopes for Sláinte care, and then discovered that people with dementia, we weren't even included in Sláinte care. So what kind of a program is that for government? So we're not. So needless to say, we are raging in one way, and in another way, we're glad that the people that stepped down from Sláinte care did, because at least we may have a review of it, and we may be included and remove. You know, it's our right, it's our human right to be involved in Sláinte care. So I will finish by saying that thanks again for what you have done, and I will have to add the famous words of our health service. That it needs to be quickly fixed, and it needs to be a service for all of us. I know there were words that said that somebody said at one stage it's not fit for purpose. Many days, many of us with dementia in this country wake up and we agree with those words. It is not fit for purpose, and it is not fit to eliminate us. So what do we want? We want person-centered care with adequate budgets throughout the year. And I hope all of our politicians will step up to the plate and ensure that we're recognized first as a disability. We need to be recognized as disability. And I want to tell you, your constituents are working and they need to stay on their jobs, and they need to be guarded under the law. So we need to be recognized as disability. We want you to be innovative and create better budgets. We want our blue parking badge so we can continue, for those of us who can drive, that we can continue to drive. And as I said, we want you to be innovative and get us out of our houses, get our resource centres up and running, you know, because We don't need to be isolated and sad and lonely. And I hate to say this 8 years later. And to be honest with you, it breaks my heart that I'm here with you today and ask you the same thing 8 years later. And I know Denise is going to speak, but Denise's husband, Seamus, was with me and he was one of my dearest friends. And, you know, we asked you then, and I'm asking you again, all those years later, you know, to please be innovative and think outside the box and support all of us.
Helen, thanks so much for that today, and such powerful words to leave us with. And thank you so much for all of your support over the last 8 years, and hopefully we'll be seeing you next year for pre-budget submission number 9, hopefully. So thanks so very much for joining us today.
Politicians will probably block out then.
Thank you. Look, I mean, we're going to move on to our next guest now. As we touched on there with Helen, COVID-19, you know, it's had a huge impact on people living with dementia and the family care. So I'm delighted now to be joined by Denise Bannon, who's a carer for her dad, Seamus, who's diagnosed with Alzheimer's 9 years ago. Denise, thanks so much for joining us today as well.
You're very welcome, Cormac.
I mean, look, Denise, we spoke 12 months ago, didn't we? I mean, how is Seamus doing since then? How's he been the last 12 months?
He's a hell of a lot worse. And I really thought this time last year we were at the worst we could be at with him. And I thought, you know, we'll come out of lockdown and he'll go back to a day centre and we'll pick up where we left off. We are far, we will never pick up from where we left off because Dad is pretty incoherent now. I suppose I miss that most is his voice, his conversation. He can't have a conversation. He'll answer yes to everything, like a toddler would. You know, he answers yes to absolutely everything. The most coherent thing he's able to say, stand up and say, I'm going to bed. And that's all day long. He doesn't get dressed. He is comfortable in his pajamas. He doesn't want to wear clothes. He doesn't go out of the house. You know, the lockdowns, and that was fine. It kept the numbers safe, if you like, you know, consideration given for the effects of, like we were all told to stay at home. People who were already experiencing cognitive difficulties, that certainly did not really did that. I was very lucky I live just around the corner from Dad, so 2 kilometers, 1 kilometer, half a kilometer wouldn't have made any difference to me. But it did to my brothers, and they couldn't visit. And we did that. We didn't want to be putting ourselves in front of the roadblocks and the guards and not saying where we were going. And so we didn't. And so Dad's world closed in on him, if you like. And that was really, really difficult to actually physically watch that happening, where he'd see a car pull in and actually ask of one of his own adult children, who's that? And I got to a point where I was saying, that's my brother, because there's no point in saying that's your son, he's after me in the family or whatever it might be. None of that made sense. So they were all my brother up to yesterday morning. Actually, the car that pulled in was my brother. And he kind of thinks, oh, okay, that's your brother, where he can come in. But there's nothing there for him about that. My brother might be attached to him in some way.
Of course. And just take us back then to, you know, I mean, what was Seamus like living pre-COVID-19? So take us back to March 2020. What was Seamus like then?
Now, I'm not going to, we were 7.5 years into Alzheimer's at that stage, and I'm not going to say we were all sweetness and light, because we weren't. Alzheimer's is a horrible, cruel, you know, it devastates a family. And I always describe it as throwing a stone into the pond and the ripples spread far and wide, you know. So it was a horrible thing. But pre-COVID, I have to say, he was very involved with the Alzheimer Society. He was on committees. He would hop in and out of the meetings to the Ashling Hotel or to Camden Street, and he was quite able to do that. Okay, so coming towards the end, my brother would happen to be driving by as the meeting was over and bring him safely home. He was the service user representative for his day care centre, Rose Cottage, and that was so important for him he went 3 times a week. The bus picked him up at 20 to 10 and dropped him back at 1:45. And that took him out Monday, Wednesday and Friday. And it wasn't just somewhere to go and something to do. It was what that gave him internally, the self-esteem, the purpose, the value he felt as a person. They need me down there. Mary Hickey needs me there. We've new guys starting, and Mary always put Dad beside the new people because Dad could help them and help them settle in. Very, very friendly man, you know. And so that was his purpose. That was his reason for getting out of the bed.
Sure. And do you think, Denise, if COVID-19 pandemic had never happened, I mean, do you think Seamus would still be going to daycare today?
Absolutely. Why wouldn't he? It saved us for 7.5 years. Why wouldn't he be still there? You know, he loved it. And as I say, he felt important going there. And he'd always go in the shirt and tie and the blazer. It was like him going to work. He had a job to do down there. And I think we all realized during COVID how important our jobs are to us. You know, the banter, the meeting, the linking in with other people. You know, any of us will say, gosh, much as I hated getting up on a Monday morning, actually, when it was taken from me, I realized I needed it. And Dad really needed that, you know.
Yeah, I mean, and look, I mean, you've talked about there how the pandemic has had an impact on your dad and on your family, but a lot of people looking in today will be wondering how you're doing. I mean, what kind of toll has all of this taken on you as the family carer?
I stopped being the paid carer and I went back to work in April because I just couldn't see the point in what I, you know, being available all day long, because Dad was going to bed. He took to the bed last November, December. And like, that's a horrible situation to be in, because when you have Alzheimer's, you're in a use it or lose it situation. And I knew Dad was up there losing it, if you like, for want of a better term. But what could we do? We couldn't go and drag him by the feet down the stairs, you know. And he'd come down, he'd have a cup of tea, and as soon as the tea was over, I'm going to bed, and off he'd go. So I go around now in the mornings for 2.5 hours, and then I go to work. I leave at 12 and go to work, because I felt I wasn't needed in the afternoon. He was in bed all the time, and look, for my own personal headspace, I needed to feel that I was doing something other than waiting for him to get up, you know, which I shouldn't have had to. I would have liked, when I gave up work, I took carers leave the week after COVID. That had been planned obviously a month before. And when I took that, I was going to be available 24/7. I was going to bring him out for coffee. I was going to get him out of Mom's hair now and again. And you know, none of that happened. The plan I had, the vision I had for what I was going to do with Dad was immediately out the window on the 13th of March. Before I even started that role, that was gone.
And look, just one final question there, Denise. I mean, look, we're all thinking of Seamus. I mean, do you think there's anything that Seamus would like to say to us today, or would like to say to any of the politicians or senators who are gathered here today? Yeah,
let me be with people. Why did you take my people away from me? I really think if he could articulate that, that's what he would say. Where are all the people? He thinks he lives in a hotel because that's his background, is hotels. And he'll often sit beside me or whatever, and he'll say to me, where's everybody? And I'd say, oh, there's nobody here, you know, they're all out. And he'd say, yeah, we had a busy night last night. We had a lot of people in for dinner. So he's still thinking in the hotel. So I really do think he would say, let me be with the people, let the people be with me. Why did you take everybody? Where is everybody gone? And he articulates that the best he can at the moment with what is left. You know, where is everybody? And I understand what's behind that sentence. Okay. I don't think he means in our house, where is everybody? He just means what's happened? You know, what kind of a world are we living in? I can't explain to him about COVID, never could. He never would have got it. He doesn't understand why people are wearing masks. He just thinks it's a funny costume or something, you know.
Sure. Denise, thanks so much for that today and for sharing your story with us again 12 months later. And please do say a big hello to Seamus from us all. I can hand back to
indeed.
Helena now. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Cormac. And thank you, Helen and Denise. We all understand that dementia is a family disease, and we know the well-being of people living with dementia and those who care for them are tightly linked. Helen, as usual, Your tireless advocacy inspires us all. And Denise, I think your dad Seamus will be so proud of you today. Our final speaker this morning is Pat Mclachlan, CEO of the Alzheimer Society of Ireland. Pat will outline what the Alzheimer Society are calling for in this budget submission. Remember to put your questions in the chat box, and I'll hand you over now to Pat.
Thanks, Helena. Firstly, I'd like to bring you back to last year's pre-budget submission and to thank you all for helping us in that submission, and to thank the government and the government parties for the support that they gave us. And that has been extremely beneficial to us. Over a period of 24 months, we've moved from 8 dementia advisors to 28. There's now a dementia advisor service right across the country available on the basis of need. And we will be getting back to face-to-face meetings with the dementia advisors for people who are impacted by dementia. I'd like to thank Minister Mary Butler for the interest, the tenacity in which she has shown since she has come into government on this issue. And she's been a tireless worker for us on this as previous chair of the All-Party Group. The All-Party Group, I met many of you during the week. It was great to meet you all. You've done extremely well for us in highlighting this is not a party political issue, but it is a political issue because resource allocation is a political issue. I'd like to thank Senator Regina Doherty, your leader of the Shannon, who has stayed in contact with me during COVID to see what she and the party can do. And I'd also like to thank the HSE, who have been very supportive to us during COVID in relation to our service level agreements. And we have been on in the media in the last few months about the difficulty in securing resources for reopening our services. A lot of refurbishments needed, and have worked very closely with us on that and provided us with a lot of support. I'd also like to talk about our own organisation just for a minute. When the government announced that there was a need for a lockdown, we offered them our fleet of over 30 buses, our premises, and many people don't know, up to 50 of our staff immediately transferred to work in nursing homes for the HSE. Also, our staff continued to work in home care, going into houses, many situations not being let in, staying the course, coaxing people to let them back in. Our staff developed the daycare at home model in conjunction with the HSE. That's been evaluated and rolled out nationally and it's been tremendous support. But behind that, there were also the people making the support calls, thousands and thousands of support calls made to people who had been attending our services. We had to get activity packs, design activity packs to suit people in that situation. We had to change and put in our choirs in a virtual way, our support groups, our family care training, our helpline stayed going, and all of that with the support of our branches, our volunteers, our fantastic working groups who have stayed the course with us. So a big thank you to all, even if people think they were on the front line, they were absolutely supporting the front line. I'm not going to dwell too much on the ask because they're there, but just to give you, I suppose, an indication of how COVID impacted on us. We did have 47 centres that were operating day centres, but only 10 of those were either owned or leased by ASI. Another 13 were either leased or rented, or we had the use of them in HSE buildings. We had 16 day centres in community halls, and we also had day centres in the private sector. So it meant that we were actually quite vulnerable. We didn't realise the degree of vulnerability we had until we began to think about reopening. And we were sharing halls, we were in buildings that we were not allowed back into. And I suppose a prime example of that is Kildare, where in the few short years, 5 years that I'm with ASI, we've been in a voluntary organisation, Moore Abbey. They needed the space. We then moved to a golf club that had space, and they equally had to say, no, we can't continue with you. Then moved to a nursing home who had space, and before lockdown, they said, you are considered no visitors, you have to get off the site. And we are trying desperately and we have good support from the HSE and good support from the local authorities on it. We're trying to work at a solution. So those are the challenges that we face in many counties arising from COVID. We also face the challenge that many of our services did not operate for 5 days a week. 21 of our 47 centres operated for 5 days a week, but 18 of them operated for only 1 or 2 days. So it meant that we had capacity problems, and we still have major capacity problems. And that's why we have identified the 18 million which is needed. There is a fund needed. There are changes to that, even from the time we did the submission. We have had movement. We've had good news in relation to planning permission in Mallow. Even in the last 24 hours, we've had good news from the HSE in relation to monies being provided to find a solution for Cavan. So that list keeps changing. But the core issue is that we do not have sufficient quality buildings. We don't have to own them. We can operate them. That's a matter for government. But there is a need for a fund, because this is a crisis. And I'm from County Roscommon. When I go back to County Roscommon, every person that lives in County Roscommon, all 65,000, is the same number of people that have dementia in Ireland at present. So I can see the present. I can also see the future if I go into County Mayo and County Leitrim and put them together, because by 2050, that is the number. Over 150,000 people will have dementia or some form of dementia. This is a crisis. There's no question about that. We're also seeking 2.3 million in family care support packages. We have put a lot of money into that area. We've had our care training, our support groups in a virtual way. We will get back hopefully to face-to-face. There's a big demand for those services. Helen has already eloquently spoken about the issues in relation to what people face with younger onset dementia. It is not something that you should have to wait for until you're 65 until you get support. €1 million would provide us with a lot of flexible support to deal with the particular challenges associated with younger onset. 6 million we're also saying is needed for dementia home care supports. The benefit of specific home care packages, intensive home care packages have been proven. All of these have been evaluated. They're in the pack. We also believe the time is right, and I want to pay tribute to the research community who have come together and worked with us so closely in relation to a research agenda that we're all agreeing on. There is a prospect now of research having a real impact for us, and 1.5 million would allow us to make a major start. People who are impacted by dementia and their carers are offering themselves in the research area. Go onto our website and just see what can happen. And also, we now know the potential that modifiable risk factors can prevent or delay up to 40% of dementias. But we need to run public brain health campaigns on that. So that's our ask. I'd like to comment on Sláinte Care because it wasn't a topic that was getting huge attention when we did this submission, and Helen quite rightly has spoken about it. To me, when I look back on all of the issues that we're looking for a resource on, I believe much of our difficulty relates to Sláinte Care. Sláinte Care is an excellent blueprint for the service, for the health services, but I'm afraid that it left dementia behind or didn't give it the degree of specific mention which is required. There is naturally a concentration on beds and there's a preoccupation with the amount of additional acute beds and rehabilitation beds. The capacity of the health service isn't all about beds. It's about the support to people who have dementia. It's about the support to their carers. It's about support clubs. It's about cafes. It's about daycare. It's about home care. So it doesn't necessarily need massive capital in investment. I believe that if Sláinte Care had dealt with the issue of dementia, I don't believe we would be arguing about whether we needed a dementia capital development fund. I think it would be there. We might be arguing about the amount of it, but I think we would be in the National Development Plan. I think we wouldn't be fighting now to call it a chronic disease. What more chronic disease is there than dementia? I don't think we'd be arguing and having to fight to say to our acute hospitals, nor neither should you as parliamentarians, why should we have to ask our acute hospitals why only 6% of them have a dementia inpatient care pathway? That doesn't cost money, it costs organisation. That's the situation since 2014 and it hasn't changed. We wouldn't have had to fight, and we didn't succeed in getting the GP contract to include dementia care as a chronic illness. We wouldn't have to be asking why in a service plan, an excellent service plan from the HSE, why out of 350 performance indicators, none of them relate to dementia care. So I think we need to think about staunch care. It's 4 years on, and there will be a lot of argument about whether it's working. Is it working? Is it not working? There should equally be a concern about whether there are issues that didn't get sufficient mention and consideration in staunch care. And it doesn't take a lot to revisit that. So I really want to thank everybody who have helped us on this. I want to thank the people who assisted us when we were drawing up our set of proposals. And we hope that you will, parliamentarians, fight for us, because in fighting for us, you're fighting for your constituents. And I want to really thank all of those people who have come on and who support us right through the years and have supported. And thank you, Helena, and thank all of our contributors who spoke so eloquently about the impact of dementia on their lives, whether they had dementia or a type of dementia, or whether they were a carer. So thank you all very much.
Thank you, Pat. Actually, in the chat box, a lot of people are agreeing with what you say about the need for robust funding. So we are coming to the end of this morning's pre-budget submission. So it's time to say goodbye, but it is only goodbye for now. People affected by dementia are struggling, and we cannot stop advocating until their situation is addressed. There are a number of people I would like to thank. Firstly, our speakers, Nora, Helen, Denise, Cormac and Pat. You all shone a light on the urgent need out there and how these must be addressed. To the backroom team in the Alzheimer Society who made this virtual meeting possible, and to all of you who took time out of your busy day to attend today's launch. We really do appreciate your ongoing support. As Pat said, dementia affects more than 64,000 people in Ireland and their families, including my own family. I suppose there would be war at home if I didn't let my husband Kevin have the last word. So over to you, dear Kevin.
Well, I can safely say that this is the first time I've ever had the last word on anything in our house anyway. My name is Kevin and I have Lewy body dementia. And my message today is that this is about all of us. Dementia is not some type of rare illness, as you all know. And the numbers are growing rapidly. Alzheimer's UK estimate that imagine 1 in 3 children born in 2015 will go on to develop some type of dementia in their lifetime. The numbers are growing. This is about your future, older self, and your children. Ministers, TDs, senators, representatives, I have faith in every single one of you. I believe all of you became involved in politics to make positive change in your communities, and you do, and I've seen it. But the dementia community in Ireland is in a crisis. We all struggle in many different ways, and you have so much power and influence to improve our lives. You'll see our presentation today. We will spend from now until the budget to find out, did they hear us? Did we make a difference? Each of you represents a different community, and you probably know many people who have dementia, or their loved ones have dementia. Over 500,000 people in Ireland have a family member with this disease. All of those are struggling. They're struggling with home care, with daycare, with respite care, so many other issues. I hope you will work to change that and lobby for meaningful dementia funding in budget 2020. I enjoy talking, as probably a lot of you know, and sometimes I probably talk too much. So it's rare that I quote other people. But as I prepared for today, I thought about Robin Williams. And it makes me sad when I think about him, because he lived what I have, and that is Lewy body dementia. And that is actually what took him. He said, no matter what people tell you, words and ideas change the world. Well, you have heard our words, but I personally believe that action talks louder than words. The Alzheimer Society of Ireland have the idea is now we need you to change the world. Thank you for your time this morning. The meeting will end shortly. Thanks.